Hello, good morning, and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. Let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper. These are the topics that we shall be discussing today, 9 in total. But before we start, I urge all of you to press the like button, share your feedback in the comment section, and subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet. Let's get started and let's look at topic number 1 relevant for GS paper 2. Supreme Court puts brakes on bulldozer culture. Bulldozer Raj, bulldozer justice. These are the terms that you may be familiar with. But the name that you should suggest for the civil services examination should be bulldozer action. Now, what is this bulldozer action? There is a disturbance in a particular area, particularly a communal disturbance between two religious communities. Then what happens? The administration enters into the picture, brings in the bulldozer, and demolishes the house of the accused in this communal disturbance. The allegation by the critics is that this is similar to something called state-sponsored violence. They say it is the violation of the rule of law. For example, who has the power to declare somebody as guilty? That's the power available with the courts, right? But even the courts cannot order the demolition of the property or the buildings of accused, or even for that matter, those who have been convicted of crimes. There is no law which allows anybody to destroy, to demolish the properties of even those who have been convicted for crimes, leave alone accused. And this, the critics argued, is a state-sponsored violence. And they particularly argue that this demolition activity is carried out particularly against those belonging to a particular religious community. The administration, on the other hand, justifies saying we are targeting only the illegal constructions. Should we allow illegal constructions on our land? Should we allow anybody to encroach upon the public land? No. So whenever we see illegal constructions being carried out, we order the demolition. So this is according to law, not violating the rule of law, because we are following the law of the land and ordering the demolition of illegally constructed properties and buildings. But sometimes it takes an extreme form. For example, an individual rented his house to an individual. Now, the son of this tenant was accused of a communal disturbance. Administration enters, demolishes the house of the owner. This, some people argue, violates rule of law. Why? Because in this house, there are also others who are residing. This house is a dwelling space, not only for this accused, but also for others who are not accused of any crime. And they say this smacks of justice concept that we saw in medieval world, where if an individual was accused of treason, was accused of committing crimes, along with that individual, his family members were also executed. This bulldozer action and petitions challenging this bulldozer action were pending in the Supreme Court for more than 3 years. But in September this year, the Supreme Court ordered a pause on this bulldozer action, saying we will pause this bulldozer action till October 1 and maybe we will issue guidelines. The Supreme Court was categorical in stating that we are not against demolishing illegally acquired properties or illegally constructed properties. Supreme Court clarified that even if there is a mosque or a temple or a gurdwara or for that matter any religious place, but it has been illegally constructed, demolish it. We are only pausing the demolitions that you carry out in such a situation where there is a communal disturbance and you target the houses belonging to a particular religious community. And now finally yesterday, the Supreme Court, what it has done, it has invoked its plenary power under Article 142 of the Constitution. Under Article 142, Supreme Court can give any order so as to give complete justice. And now Supreme Court has invoked this power under Article 142 of the Constitution to lay down guidelines when it comes to this bulldozer action. But Supreme Court clarified, what do we mean by this bulldozer action? We are not against demolishing those illegally constructed structures, buildings or properties. What we are concerned with is that you bring in the bulldozer and demolish the house of an individual, but the rest of the houses, buildings in the area are left unattended, untouched, undemolished. So basically, we will then say that your intention is to only target the accused of this communal violence. Your intention is not to destroy or demolish the illegally constructed structures. Because if your intention was to demolish illegally constructed structures, then you could not have taken action only against this individual and his property, and remaining structures are left untouched. It is this bulldozer action that we are against. And for this type of bulldozer action, there are the guidelines. And what are the guidelines? Guidelines number 1. Whenever you want to demolish what you call illegally constructed building of an individual, give them 15-day notice. So when you give them 15-day notice, at the same time, you have to identify that structure which you think has been illegally constructed. You also have to give the reason why this illegally constructed structure is being demolished. Give reasons. And not just that, you have to give a date for personal hearing. That means you have to hear that accused who is accused of constructing an illegal building. You have to hear him, that too personally. And whenever you hear him personally, you have to record the minutes of the meeting, the minutes of this hearing, which means everything will go on record so that whatever clarification was given by this accused, that can be tomorrow placed in a court of law, so that now the court of law can be justified, can justify itself, satisfy itself whether the structure should have been demolished or not. So what are the guidelines? 15-day notice to this accused. Identify the structure which you think has been illegally constructed. Give the reasons why this illegally constructed structure is being demolished. And also give the date of a personal hearing, and whatever is being clarified in that personal hearing, record the minutes of that hearing. And even after that, if the administration goes ahead and orders the demolition, saying we are not satisfied with the arguments you have presented, we are not satisfied with the clarifications which you have presented, we are going ahead with demolition. Even then, you give 15-day pause. That means after the administration decides, after hearing you, that no, this structure needs to be demolished, this demolition cannot take place for 15 days. Why 15 days? Maybe this owner of the structure will on his own demolish this illegal structure, or will approach the court and get the stay on this demolition. And whenever this demolition takes place, you have to get it videographed. Supreme Court further clarified that when it comes to right to life and personal liberty under Article 21 of the Constitution, that right to life and personal liberty includes right to shelter. And in that house, which you think has been illegally constructed, it's not only the accused of a communal violence who is residing in that house. There are others also who use this house as a dwelling space. So this right to shelter is a fundamental right. Supreme Court has further reiterated and clarified in this case. But long story short, What is this bulldozer action? Whenever there is a communal disturbance in a particular area, administration brings in the bulldozer and demolishes the house of the accused of this communal violence. Administration says we are only targeting the illegally constructed properties and buildings, while the petitioners, the critics, they say this is state-sponsored violence. And for that now, Supreme Court has invoked its power under Article 142 and laid down guidelines. And Supreme Court further clarified that if there are officials who are violating this order, they will be booked for contempt. And if there are structures which have been illegally demolished, now who will restore those buildings? For that, we will deduct money from your salary. So you will be responsible for the restitution of the demolished property. The public officials will be responsible. This is what you need to know from topic number 1. Supreme Court puts brake on the bulldozer culture. Let's look at another topic, again relevant for GS paper 2 from the page number 1 of today's Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper. Try your stand on your own legs, Supreme Court tells Ajit's Nationalist Congress Party. Now, what has happened in this case? There was a split in the Nationalist Congress Party of Sharad Pawar. Close to 53 MLAs were part of the Maharashtra Legislative Assembly from NCP, got split, and 40 of them, they sided with Ajit Pawar. Long story short, whenever there is a split in a political party, who decides who will get the name of this political party, who will get the symbol of that political party? That is decided by the Election Commission of India. How? According to the Election Symbols Order of 1968. And to be more precise, under this Election Symbols Order, there is paragraph 15. According to this paragraph 15, Election Commission of India has the power to adjudicate what? When there are conflicting claims, when there's a split in a political party and 2 or more factions are claiming that we are the real political party, we should get the name, we should get the symbol of this political party. And how Election Commission of India decides which faction of this political party to be recognized as the real political party, to give that party the symbol. Election Commission performs various tests. Tests such as the strength in the organization, called organizational strength, and legislative strength. What do we mean by organizational strength and legislative strength? Basically, Election Commission of India looks into that political party and sees what are the aims and objectives of this political party. Then looks into the constitution of that political party. Because the constitution will say how the office bearers are to be elected, how the office bearers are to be removed, what is the term of the office of these office bearers, and then we'll perform this test. Which faction has the majority in the organization? Which faction has the majority in the legislative organization, in the legislative wing? What does that mean? That means if NCP has split, one faction led by Sharad Pawar, the other faction led by Ajit Pawar, which faction is the real NCP? And which faction will get the clock symbol of the NCP? That Election Commission of India decides. How Election Commission of India will decide? It will look into the aims and objectives of NCP by looking into the constitution of the NCP. Because NCP constitution will also say how the office members are to be appointed, are elected or removed, what is their term, what is their tenure. And then Election Commission of India will look into the test. Test is how many members in the organization of the NCP support Sharad Pawar and support Ajit Pawar. Who has the majority in the organization? There are members of NCP who are part of the legislature, whether it is Legislative Assembly, Legislative Council, Rajya Sabha, Lok Sabha. How many of these legislators support Sharad Pawar? How many legislators support Ajit Pawar? Basis this, Election Commission of India will decide which is the real NCP. And when it was decided under para 15 of the Election Symbols Order of 1968, Election Commission of India ruled that the real NCP is the Ajit Pawar's NCP. Sharad Pawar approached the Supreme Court, challenged this decision of the Election Commission of India in deciding that Ajit Pawar is the real leader of the NCP and the real NCP is Ajit Pawar's NCP. Now this matter is pending before the court. Now what court has done? Court ordered that Ajit Pawar, you can use the name NCP because Election Commission of India has decided. You can even use the symbol of NCP, which is clock. But every time you should mention and you should give an advertisement in the newspapers that this symbol, clock symbol, this matter is pending before the Supreme Court. So I'm using the symbol based on the directives of the Supreme Court. Otherwise, this matter is pending before the court. This is a dispute that we have to resolve in the court of law. Why? Because Ajit Pawar said, because of ideological differences, we parted ways with Sharad Pawar. And now Sharad Pawar approaches the court again, saying if we have split based on ideological differences, then why are those candidates who are contesting election on Ajit Pawar's NCP's ticket using my name, my photograph in election material? And in this case, now the Supreme Court has asked Ajit Pawar's faction that you should not use the name and the photo of Sharad Pawar. Stand on your own legs. But this is to clarify that Supreme Court is yet to rule on Sharad Pawar's petition, challenging the Election Commission of India's direction, adjudication that Ajit Pawar's NCP is the real NCP. But for this, you need to know how this split in a political party is decided by the Election Commission of India. That completes topic number 2. Let's look at topic number 3, the perfect cocktail of layered discrimination. But let me tell you right at the outset that this article, this column is written by the spokesperson of the DMK, which is the ruling political party, a regional political party in Tamil Nadu. Does that mean we should not read this article? We should still read this article, but we should not completely embrace whatever is written in this article because there is an element of politics also. There are some inflammatory things as well, which as a civil services aspirant, you should get rid of. But nevertheless, there are some important points made in this article. That is why we will discuss it. And this talks about delimitation. India is a federal polity. And in federal polity, there are 2 units, center and states. DMK spokesperson says, Supreme Court has said, federalism is part of the basic structure of the Indian Constitution, which is true. DMK spokesperson says that Supreme Court has said that states are not arbitrary administrative units. These are constitutional units, which is also true, which means states are not subservient to the center. Center has its own role and space within the Constitution. States have their own roles, powers and functions within the Constitution as well. It's not that center is subservient to the state or the state is subservient to the center. Both have their own independent existence. But at the same time, this column talks about delimitation. And what is this delimitation? Redrawal of electoral boundaries in India under Article 82 of the Constitution. Constitution says that after each census, there should be reorganization. After each census, what do we get to know? The increase or decrease in our population. Corresponding to increase or decrease in the population, representatives should be made available in Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies. Which means as the population increases, the number of legislators, let's say in Lok Sabha, will also need to increase. Delimitation happened after the censuses of 1951, then again 1961, then again 1971. And each time we saw that there was an increase in the number of seats. For example, we had 520 seats in Lok Sabha in 1951. After the delimitation, we saw there was an increase. Initially, there was 489, then 520 after the census of 1961. then 543 after the census of 1973, which means after the census of 1971, because in 1973 delimitation was carried out. So in independent India, when we saw initially there were 489 members in the Lok Sabha, which increased to 520 after delimitation because population is increased, which increased to 543 after delimitation because after census because population is increased. This was the time when the southern states protested, saying you are basically penalizing good performing southern states. How? Because these southern states have effectively implemented family planning programs. So we are in a position to control our population, but these northern states, these Bimaru states as they were called, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, these Bimaru states, they have been unable to control their population. So there the population is increasing, and corresponding to that, they will have more representation in Lok Sabha. So the southern states approached Srimati Gandhi, who was then the Prime Minister, and requested her that there should be no further delimitation. Constitution was amended. 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act 1976. Delimitation exercise was frozen for 25 years. No further delimitation till the census of 2001. In 2001, after the census of 2001, another delimitation was carried out. The final order was given in 2008. So you have to be sure that delimitation has been carried out 4 times in India since independence. After the census of 51, 61, 71, and then in 2001. Because in 1976, Constitution was amended to say that there should be no further delimitation till the census of 2001. Otherwise, after every census, there should have been the increase in the number of seats. Southern states said we would be at a disadvantage. 2001, Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee. Internal reorganization means there is a state, let's say it has 10 constituencies, but it may be possible that in 2 or 3 constituencies, the population is increased manifold. But in some constituencies, the population has not increased that much. So there is a discrepancy. One constituency may have 2 lakh voters. Another constituency may have 50,000 voters. Another constituency may have 3 lakh voters. So in 2008, delimitation order said, let's conduct this internal reorganization so that within the state, number of seats will remain the same. But we will distribute it equally, evenly across the constituencies in that state. And there was another reason why delimitation was carried out in after the census of 2001, to increase the number of seats reserved for SCs and STs. Total number of seats will remain the same, but the number of seats reserved for SCs and STs will increase according to their population in 2001 census. That was the reason that delimitation was carried out in 2002. The final award was given in 2008. Here the spokesperson of the DMK, they argued that look at the total fertility rate. What is this total fertility rate? Average number of children a woman gives birth to during her reproductive years. That's what we call total fertility rate. Then there is another term called replacement level. And this replacement level is 2.1. What is this 2.1? There is mother and father. If they give birth to 2 children, that means after the death of mother and father, they are replaced by their 2 kids. After they also marry, they will be replaced by their 2 kids. So how can we ensure that population stabilizes? 2 mother and father, they will give birth to 2 kids. That is what we call replacement level. That means these kids will replace their parents so that population does not increase, it stabilizes. Replacement level 2.1. But why 1.1? you also need to factor that not all women will give birth to kids. You also need to factor in that not all kids will survive. That's why 0.1 as a factor. But what is the total fertility rate? The average number of children that a woman can give birth to during her reproductive years. This should be 2.1, which is the replacement level. Because if it is 2.1, that means the population will stabilize. Clear? When it comes to this total fertility rate in southern India, for example, in non-Hindi speaking states such as Bengal, such as Tamil Nadu, such as Kerala, the author says it is in the range of 1.6 to 1.8, which means below the replacement level, which means the population in these non-Hindi speaking states will further decline. But what is the total fertility rate in Hindi speaking areas such as Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh? It is 3.5, which means the population there will increase. Which means if delimitation is carried out now, because Prime Minister, according to the spokesperson, he has given enough hints that we will carry out delimitation, which means the northern states will have more representation in Lok Sabha than the southern states, and southern states would be at a disadvantage. Further, the spokesperson of the DMK says, these southern states have done well when it comes to generating revenue, contributing to the GDP of the nation. And despite that, the states such as Karnataka, Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu, they receive only 30% of the total direct taxes contributed by the states. While as the states such as Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, they receive between 250 to 350%. Which means we are generating more revenue as compared to these states, yet we get less funds from the center. At the same time, we will then lose out on representation also if delimitation is carried out in 2026. Further, who decides it? You might say that it is decided by a constitutional body called Finance Commission. So you can't hold government responsible for the decisions of the Finance Commission. But Finance Commission is given terms of reference, that while deciding what is the percentage of this money that should be given to the states, what is the percentage of this divisible pool of taxes that should be given to the states. For that, initially, the population figures that used to be taken into account was according to the census of 1971. But now, Mr. Modi's government has said that we will allocate resources to states based on the population, but that population would be according to 2011 census and not 1971 census. But sir, why 1971 census? Because 1971 census was the last census after which delimitation was carried out, which led to increase in the number of seats. That is why even for the presidential election, which is done based on proportional representation system, where population plays a very important role in deciding a particular state gets how many votes, that vote based on the population is decided according to the population figure of 1971 census. So this, the spokesperson of the DMK would discriminate against the southern states. And then we will lose our representation in Lok Sabha. And then he draws attention to the Boston Tea Party, which happened in the United States, where it was said that no taxation without representation. We will refuse to pay tax imposed by the British Parliament because we don't have representation. So basically, it's like an indirect threat that these southern states should stop paying taxes because we will lose our representation in the Lok Sabha. But then towards the end, he gives some solutions. He gives some alternatives. What are the alternatives? Number one, they say that the alternative is, number one, exactly what Mr. Vajpayee and before Mr. Vajpayee, Srimati Indira Gandhi did. Amend the constitution again and delay delimitation by another 25 years. So that the future generation should take a call on whether delimitation should be carried out, whether there should be an increase in the number of seats in Lok Sabha or not. This is alternative number 1. If you can't do this, then alternative number 2. Permanently freeze delimitation. Don't push it to another 25 years. Permanently freeze delimitation so that there is no increase in the number of seats ever. That's alternative number 2. They say there is third alternative. Implement delimitation, but then supplement it with a new contract or new compact between the center and the states. And what is that new compact? Abolish concurrent list. All the items that are there in concurrent list, abolish them, give this power to the states. Residuary power should be entrusted to the states. What is a residuary power? That means if there is an item which is not mentioned in either union list or state list or concurrent list, this is a residue, leftover. An item neither mentioned in union list, state list, concurrent list. On this matter, who has the power to make laws? Parliament. Give this residuary power to the states. And in fact, there should be a large scale, whole scale transfer of subjects from union list to state list. So that in union list, only few items will remain. And what are these few items? Such as external affairs should be within the union list, defense should be within the union list, currency should be in the union list, everything else should be given to the states. So basically what the spokesperson of the DMK is asking for, Article 370 type structure, which used to be for J&K, now they are asking for, this should be for every single state in India. Either, what is the alternative? Amend the constitution again and further delay delimitation by another 25 years. Second alternative, permanently freeze the number of seats, no more delimitation. Third alternative, go ahead with delimitation, but then there should be something else as well, supplemented to the delimitation exercise. And what is that supplementation? Abolish concurrent list, give that power to the states. Give residuary power to the state. Whole scale, large scale transfer of subjects from union list to state list, so that what remains in union list will only be defense, external affairs and currency. Everything else should be given to the states. Or fourth, what is the fourth option? There should be increase in the number of seats in Lok Sabha, but increase the number of seats in every state to offset. So if there is a massive increase in the number of seats to northern states or Hindi speaking areas, to offset that massive increase, give every state also some increase in the number of seats so that you can offset this. This, according to the DMK spokesperson and the General Secretary of the Bangla POCO, are the alternatives to the delimitation exercise. That is what you need to understand from this topic. Any question? Okay. Let's look at topic number 4, Manipur's misery. The center must take the initiative in resolving the crisis, says the Hindu editorial. Now, this Manipur crisis is going on for more than a year now. And what triggered this crisis was the ruling of the Manipur High Court. What was that ruling? Manipur is basically valley and the hills. Valley is dominated by the Metis and the hills are dominated by the tribes. For example, Kukis, Nagas, Zos. Kukis, Nagas, Zos, these are scheduled tribes. Metis, some of them are SCs, some of them are OBCs, but they had a long pending demand that we should also be given the status of the scheduled tribes. Manipur High Court gave an order, directed the state government that you should take steps so that ST status should be given to Metis. And you should take these steps preferably within the 1 month of the receipt of this order. That means if you have received this order today, within 1 month, you take the steps so that ST status is granted to Metis. Immediately after this verdict of the Manipur High Court, there were clashes between the Metis and the Kukis, which means between the tribals and the non-tribals. And ultimately, this crisis has precipitated to such a level that we are witnessing massive atrocities in Manipur. Kidnappings of Metis women as well, children as well, killings of Kukis as well. And we don't have to here be the judge who is at fault, whether Metis or Kukis. Let's not get into that, but let's understand that there is a human problem in Manipur which needs to be solved. What is the demand of the Kukis now? They demand that the hill areas that they are inhabiting should be converted into a union territory, and this union territory should be provided with the legislature. So they are basically advocating for a split in the Manipur state so that hills should be converted into a union territory with a legislature. Let valley remain with the Metis. And particularly, they are not happy with the Chief Minister of Manipur, Mr. Biren Singh, who happens to be a Metis. In fact, it is argued by various experts that it is his policies that has resulted in this wedge between the Metis and the Kukis, between the hills and the valley. Although Mr. Biren Singh did take some steps to bridge this gap. In fact, he launched an initiative called Back to the Wills, where he directed the public officials to go to the wills and address the problems and the grievances of the hill areas. But critics say it was basically targeting Nagas. So Biren Singh, through this Back to Hills program, wants to be in the good books of the Nagas, but he's still discriminating the Kukis. Long story short, there is problem. This problem needs to be addressed. And that is why even Article 355 has been invoked in Manipur. What is Article 355? It's a duty on the center. That center, you have the duty. What is the duty? You have to protect every state from external aggression and from internal disturbance. And you also need to ensure that governance in every state is carried out according to the provisions of the Constitution. Since there is internal disturbance, but there is some external push to this internal disturbance as well. There are terrorist organizations in Myanmar who, according to some people, including the Chief Minister, they're fishing in the troubled waters, and they're also instigating the Kukis. There is cross-border narco trade happening in Manipur, according to the critics. So there is a mayhem in Manipur, which needs to be addressed immediately. And this editorial says, only the center has the resources and capacity to attempt any such dialogue between the Metis and the Kukis. So you will have to nudge both these communities to peace. That is what you need to understand from this editorial, the Manipur's misery. The center must take the initiative in resolving the crisis. Clear? Let's look at another topic, municipal corporations, tax revenue share, rise in recent years. Data point in your answer gives credence to your answer, weight, legitimacy to your answer. 74th Amendment in 1992-1993. What it did, it gave a constitutional status to urban local bodies, municipalities, municipal corporations. But how will municipal corporations govern themselves? They should have funds. And how do these urban local bodies generate funds? Own tax revenue. That means they can also tax. For example, property tax is imposed by the municipalities. How do they get these funds? Through grants. Grants can be given to these urban local bodies by both the center as well as states. So these are the primary sources of revenue for these urban local bodies. Reserve Bank of India published its first report in 2022. Now it has published its second report in 2024. And what is that report? The report talks about the report on municipal finances. It is released by the Reserve Bank of India. And the theme of this report is own sources of revenue generation in municipal corporations. Opportunities and challenges in own revenue source generation. And according to this report, more corporations, for example, in southern states, in fact, other states as well, but 50% of the revenue is generated by these municipal corporations from own tax. Remaining 25%, they achieve by getting grants from the center and the states. So 50% of the budget estimate, because every municipal corporation will have some budget estimate, 50% of that they are generating from their own tax revenue, which is very good. 25% they are raising from the funds granted by center or the state. And remaining 25% comes from rental income. The properties of the municipality which may be given for rent, from that you're generating revenue, income, which is not tax, it is a different income. 25% is generated from that. So this second report of the RBI, the first one was released 2 years ago. The second report of the RBI, the report on municipal finances released by RBI. And the theme of this report was own sources of revenue generation, where urban local bodies are generating their own revenue. According to that, corporations in the southern states, they top the list. When it comes to Karnataka, Telangana, Tamil Nadu, they are on top of the list when it comes to generating revenue based on their own tax, when they apply their own tax. In fact, this number is more than 50% for Karnataka, more close to 50% for Telangana. But then there are states which are languishing, which are unable to generate their own revenue from taxation. States such as Tripura, Sikkim, Mizoram, and amongst the bigger states, we have Rajasthan, Odisha, West Bengal, Bihar, UP, and others. So this data point becomes important. So tomorrow, because various committees have suggested that municipal corporations should be given more powers of taxation so that they are able to generate their own revenue. Because when they generate their own revenue, they will have financial independence. When they will have financial independence, they will not be under the control of the state government. When they will not be under the control of the state government, that means these urban local bodies would function autonomously. And that is the basic purpose of 74th Amendment. Clear? That completes our topic number 5. Let's focus on the prelims now. And first, let's focus on British writer Harvey wins Booker Prize. Can you tell me what is this Booker Prize? This prize was established in 1969. And this award or this prize is given to an author who writes in English, writes a novel, basically the work of fiction, but this novel should have been published in UK or Ireland. That means, what is this Booker Prize? This Booker Prize is given annually, which means every year. It was established in 1969. It is given every year. To whom? To an author who writes in English, but this work should be the work of the fiction. And this book should have been published, this novel should have been published in UK or Ireland. That's the eligibility. There was a time when only the writers from the Commonwealth countries and Ireland and South Africa, only the writers of these countries were eligible to get the Booker Prize. Then in the year 2014, the rules were changed. And rules were changed to say that author of any nationality writing in English language, if he or she writes the work of fiction, but this fiction is published in UK or Ireland, that means author can be from any nationality, but writing in English, and this novel should be published in either UK or Ireland, you are eligible for the Booker Prize. Can anyone tell me what is then the difference between the Booker Prize and the International Booker Prize? What if there is a book, there is a novel, there is a work of fiction written in any other language apart from English, but now translated into English, and then this work of fiction is published in UK or Ireland? For that book, there is International Booker Prize. So what is a Booker? It is a prize given to the author of any nationality if you're writing the work in English and this work of fiction is published in UK or Ireland. You can be eligible for a Booker Prize. But what is an International Booker Prize? The work translated into English, but this work should be of fiction, translated into English, but this work of fiction should have been published in UK or Ireland. You are eligible for International Booker Prize. But in this case, since it is the translation, both the author as well as the translator, they will get equal share of the Booker Prize. And there have been some Indian writers, authors who have bagged the Booker Prize. For example, Arundhati Roy for God of Small Things, Miss Anita Desai for The Inheritance of Loss, then Kiran Desai for Inheritance of Loss. Then we have Arvind Adiga for The White Tiger. If you include Salman Rushdie as an Indian as well, then for Midnight's Children, he got the Booker Prize. If you also include V.S. Naipaul, then he also got the Booker Prize, although he is mostly considered as the British Trinidad and Tobago writer. But that is what you need to know from this article. Britain's Samantha Harvey. She has now won the Booker Prize for 2024 because this prize is given annually. And the name of this book is Orbital, which is a story. And let's see what that story is all about. Basically, one day spent at International Space Station. Let's look at another article. Himachal High Court quashes appointment of Chief Parliamentary Secretaries. Elections are over. MLAs are elected. But first, I was striving to become an MLA. Once I became an MLA, now I am not satisfied only with the post of the MLA. I also want to be a minister. Initially, there was no limit. How many ministers could be appointed by the governor of a state? Any number, but only on the advice of the chief minister. And this is where the size of the ministry would also expand. Which basically means it's a burden on the state exchequer, burden on the state revenue, finances. And thanks to Mr. Vajpayee, he was the Prime Minister, 91st Constitutional Amendment Act was passed in 2003. Constitution was amended and now there was a limit imposed. Limit was the size of the Council of Ministers, including the Prime Minister at the center. The size of the Council of Ministers, including the Chief Minister at a state, should not exceed what? Shall not exceed 15% of the Legislative Assembly. Clear? Now the point is, when there is a limit to the strength and the composition of the Council of Ministry, politicians are clever. They invented another way of bypassing this constitutional amendment. So MLAs were inducted as ministers, but other MLAs who could not be inducted as ministers. Why? Because there is a limit. Now, how to satisfy these MLAs? Give them the post of Parliamentary Secretary. Give them the same status as that of a minister, same privilege, same perks, but don't call them minister, call them Parliamentary Secretaries. And this more than 20 states have appointed Parliamentary Secretaries. But we will specifically focus on Himachal Pradesh. Why? Because in 2006, a law was passed by the Himachal Pradesh Legislative Assembly giving Chief Parliamentary Secretary status to 6 MLAs who could not have been appointed as ministers. Why? Because there is a limit. And now Himachal Pradesh High Court has said this appointment is illegal. This act is null and void. Why? Because the court said passing such a law is beyond the legislative competence of the state legislature. You are not competent to pass such a law because you are bypassing a constitutional amendment, something which is mentioned in the constitution, which imposes a limit to the number of ministers that can be appointed in a state. And how can you say these parliamentary secretaries are not ministers? Because these parliamentary secretaries, they had access to official files just like ministers. They could participate in government decision making just like ministers. They were given perks which are similar to those of the ministers. These parliamentary secretaries were allowed to fly the national flag, display Ashok Chakra on their vehicle just like ministers. They could use government seal or emblem just like ministers, which basically means they would enjoy the rank and the status of a minister. So how can you say they are not ministers? You are giving them every privilege of a minister. But you are passing this law just to bypass the limitation that has been imposed on you by the Constitution, which is the strength of the Council of Ministry shall not exceed 15% of the Legislative Assembly. As such, this law is unconstitutional, null and void. And this is beyond the legislative competence of the state legislature. Is that clear? Very good. Let's look at another fact for prelims. This article, the impact of Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana in Jammu and Kashmir. We'll skip Jammu and Kashmir, but we will focus on what is Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana. Facts related to it can be asked in the exam. There is Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana first. There is Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana 2.0. What is the difference? The year was 2016. The Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas announced and introduced the scheme called Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana. And what is that Yojana? It was targeting the women who are part of poor, weaker sections of the society, marginalized society. And how do we identify these poor women? According to socio-economic census of 2011. Because these women, one, there is pollution of the atmosphere which takes place. Environment gets polluted because they are using charcoal, wood for making food, for cooking food. It pollutes the atmosphere, but it also affects them. They are suffering from various problems related to their breathing. Some of them are suffering from asthma because of the smoke emanating from these chulas. That is why we will give them LPG cylinders. That is why the scheme comes under Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas. And Prime Minister Modi launched this scheme in Balia in Uttar Pradesh. Balia, you may know that when Quit India movement was launched on August 9, 1942, although it could not be formally launched because Mahatma Gandhi and all the important Congress leaders were arrested on 8th of August itself. But then because of Quit India movement, parallel governments were launched in different parts. For example, Satara. But the first parallel government under Chittu Pandey was launched where? In Balia in UP. And in same Balia, in 2016, Prime Minister Modi gave the first LPG connection to a woman. And the target was, we will give 8 crore LPG connections to households, deprived households, to women by March 2020. But then there was Ujjwala 2.0. 1.6 crore more LPG connections will be given. To whom? To migrant households, now who are migrating from one part of the country to another. And now we saw recently 75 lakh more connections were given. So total target of the scheme is to cover 10 crore, 35 lakh beneficiaries. Sometimes these facts can be asked in the examination. That is why you need to focus on these facts. Let's look at another topic. Flights to Bali. If you were planning a trip to Indonesia to travel to Bali, you may need to cancel your plan because Indigo, Air India and others, they've cancelled their flights. Why? Because there is volcanic eruption happening, because of which ash clouds are forming, which will be difficult for airlines to maneuver and reach Bali. But what do we need to know from the civil services examination point of view? This volcano eruption is happening in Lewotobi, Laki. And there is a pair of mountains in Indonesia known as husband and wife pair. And these are stratovolcanoes. And what are these stratovolcanoes? Anybody? Also known as composite volcanoes. These are they cone-shaped? Yes. But they have a steep symmetrical slopes. So what are these stratovolcanoes, also known as composite volcanoes? These are conical shaped, but they have a steep and symmetrical what is called slopes. Can you name some example? For example, let me write it with a different color. Mount Etna. Where is it? In Italy. Similarly, Mount Kilimanjaro. Where is it? Tanzania, right near the equator. So long story short, there is a pair of husband-wife mountains in Indonesia known as Lewotobi Laki. It's a male mountain, and its counterpart, the female, is Lewotobi Perempuan. This is a pair of composite volcanoes or stratovolcanoes. And this Lewotobi Laki has erupted, because of which volcanic eruption has taken place. In fact, it is one of the 120 active volcanoes in Indonesia. And this is included in a part known as Ring of Fire. What is this Ring of Fire? It's an area in the Pacific Ocean basin where a lot of volcanic activity, earthquake activity takes place. And if you look at this Ring of Fire, you would have read it that it is horseshoe shaped. And its radius, its area is 40,000 kilometers. What are the important characteristics of this Ring of Fire? Characteristic number 1, volcanic activity. It is argued that about 70% of the world's volcanic activity occurs, is located in this ring of fire. Why? Because a lot of subduction plates here. Some important volcanic eruptions, for example, Mount Fuji in Japan, Mount Helens in United States. Earthquakes are also common in this area. It is argued that close to 80% of the earthquakes happen in this particular area because there are lots of subduction zones in this area. And at the same time, you will see a lot of tectonic plates in this ring of fire. Can you name these tectonic plates? Anyone? Yes, there is a Pacific plate, there is a North American plate, there is a Philippine Sea plate, there is a Eurasian plate. So long story short, there is a volcanic eruption from Lewotobi, Laki, which is one of the 20 active volcanoes in Indonesia. And there is a pair of mountains. These are stratovolcanoes, basically composite volcanoes. The male part, Lewotobi, Laki, and the female, Lewotobi, Perimpon. And these composite volcanoes, you can see some examples are Mount Etna, Mount Kilimanjaro, although Mount Kilimanjaro is not considered to be an active volcano anymore. It's considered to be dormant. But this mountain is located in the ring of fire, which is considered to be, as you can see from this image, it's like horse-shaped and close to 40,000 kilometers in wide. And you will see a lot of volcanic activity, earthquakes, and tectonic plates are present in this area. Let's look at two questions for your mains practice. Question number one, and this is something that we've discussed in the class itself. Discuss the various alternatives to the current delimitation process in India, with special reference to the challenges posed by the existing framework. Suggest measures to ensure better representation and equal distribution of political power. Second, examine the significance of rule of law in the functioning of a democratic society. Critically analyze the challenges faced by India in upholding the rule of law and suggest reforms to strengthen its implementation. That's about it from today's The Hindu newspaper analysis. I'll see you again tomorrow, 10 o'clock in the morning. Till then, have a great time. All the best. Bye-bye. And don't forget to press the like button and subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet. Goodbye. Take care.